Thank you, everybody, for joining us. My name is Dan Tryman, and I'm the CEO of New England Israel Business Council, NEIBC for short. It's a not-for-profit volunteer organization that its mission is to strengthen the business relationship between Israel and the US in general, but in particular, Massachusetts area. And we believe that by strengthening those business relationships and helping people working with each other, we making the world a little bit better. What I would like is to thank the three panelists that we have today, exceptional entrepreneurs and exceptional CEOs. Thank you to Karen Lesham, the CEO of Ocon Medical, Debbie Garner, the CEO of Femselect, and Inbal Tzafir-Levi, the CEO of Gina Life. I also would like to thank moderator David Offer. He's a senior partner with Arira Health. And without further ado, I'll invite David to the show. The floor is yours, David.
Thank you very much, Dan, and it's quite a pleasure for me to be moderating this session. I myself have been in medtech 30 years, and most all of my roles have at some point incorporated technologies and markets surrounding women's health, from my time in diagnostics with Abbott Labs, devices with Boston Scientific, and certainly my role in corporate development at Hologic, which was the largest company globally focused strictly in women's health, that even continued through my time at Medtronic. So I'm very pleased to have our three esteemed CEOs here. I'm going to invite each of them to go through their company individually for about 10 minutes, ask some questions back and forth. Then after each of the companies have been able to present themselves and discuss what they're developing and what their attempt at driving women's health through technology in medtech is about, then we'll all collect together as a group and talk about the industry in general. So let's start with Karen Lesham from Ocon. Karen, if you'd like to put together your deck and present that, walk us through a little bit on the company.
This is a nice turn up, Dan. Congratulations. I want to share my screen. Hold on, let's make sure that this works well. And thank you, Dave, for the introduction. So thank you, everybody. Some of you may have heard me pitch before and know what Ocon do, and some are even our customers. Ocon stands for O configuration. We deliver drugs to the uterus on what I call, professionally speaking, a very cool little ball. There's a reason for this ball, and I'll explain why it is so cool in just a minute. So Ocon is not a very young company. We've been around for about 10 years. We sit in a city called Modi'in in Israel. It's right between Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. And we do everything here. We do all of our manufacturing. We do our research and development in our labs. We have all of the departments, our clinical department, medical department, regulatory and quality departments. And we do have offices in Europe that handle some of our operations and commercial activities. We are 90% women. But we do believe in gender diversity, so we do have a couple men that work for us as well. Recently, we won a really prestigious award by Frost & Sullivan, which got us very excited for being leaders in innovation in our space. And we are backed by some incredible VCs, both in Israel and the United States. So Ocon really develops a platform to treat an array of women diseases that either cater or stem from the uterus. And so if you look at these huge markets where we cater to, you'll find that some of our products that are already commercial cater to contraception that is non-hormonal, but we're also working on advancements in treating 1 in 4 women that suffer from abnormal uterine bleeding. We're going to look at uterine fibroids, endometriosis, menopause, of course, other abnormal uterine bleeding, active ingredients. And we're really going to make sure that all of these oral formulations that we take, we can move away from all the systemic side effects, put it on a little ball directly at the target tissue and treat them there. So these are very expensive hobbies. And we'll talk a little bit about how to finance them, but I do want to see some of these actually have a chip on them. As an internal wearable, we wear them anyway. And so if we are able to look at disease progression, check out our microbiome, which is becoming super interesting as a topic these days, especially in the uterus, I think we would be very beneficial of having a little chip on these devices as well. I want to spend one more minute to show you why a ball caters perfectly to the women's anatomy. And if you look at the available T-shaped plastic framed IUDs that are available today, and regardless if they are hormonal or non-hormonal, they are inherently too big for the average uterine size. Look at the little ball compared to what we see today. And I want to show you some of the drawbacks of what women have to endure by choosing to wear an intrauterine device. So if you take a look at your left side of the screen, you'll see that these devices either perforate the walls of the uterus or they malposition. And these drawbacks are the biggest drawbacks which make women discontinue use of these IUDs. When you try to stick a plastic frame that's too big, these side effects would happen. The two-dimensional T-shaped IUD in a cavity that's three-dimensional will have all these drawbacks. I want to show you how the little ball folds inside the uterus. Take a look. It almost has a built-in safety mechanism. It turns back away from the fundus, protecting it so that we don't perforate it. It's very small, it's very pliable. It's not made of plastic. This is a stent made of nitinol. Here you see copper beads, which poison sperm. So this is a contraception device. But instead of these copper beads, we could put any API or any drug, pharmaceutical chemical on this device to make sure that we cater directly into the uterus. The uterus is a live organ. It kind of folds and contracts. So if we have a small pliable ball, it much fits the uterine much better than other devices. So we have 100,000 users in the world, including the CEO. And from that, we learned that this device is not a better device in terms of efficacy, but it's a much safer device. We see a lot less perforations, a lot less ectopic pregnancies. And of course, there's no malposition. A ball stays a ball, no matter which way it turns. The other indication that we're working on, and we have now opened a huge clinical study across Israel and 9 centers all across the country, is for 1 in 4 women that suffer from abnormal uterine bleeding. This is a new paradigm of treatment, moving away from very invasive hospital-based. We're creating a new paradigm of treatment for women that suffer from abnormal uterine bleeding with a one single-use, once-and-done device. This will come in and go out within 30 minutes in the doctor's office without a hospital need. This is a very cheap and safe and easy procedure. Any doctor can do this. It's a simple IUD insertion, and it treats 1 in 4 women that suffer from this debilitating condition. So we're going to dominate this market by using both hormonal and non-hormonal therapies. And this is our time frame for really reaching the United States. So we're going to work really hard to bring 2 of our assets by 2024 into the FDA and get a marketing approval. And our 3rd asset is, of course, going to be initiated in women around that time. So it's a really exciting time to be in women's health. Look at the exits that are going on, especially in 2020 and 2021. And this is also for my colleagues and friends that are here that are going to present their companies. We see a lot of companies go very exciting space to be in at this time. I'm really happy with the people that have joined OCON, especially the people on our board. They will be visiting here in a very special and large, hopefully, will be able to take place Women's Health 2 that we will have here at the end of February. So they will be visiting us and also giving lectures. Anula Jayasuriya, the chairwoman of our board, Robert Auerbach, who's an OBGYN professor out of Yale. He was the former president and CEO of Cooper Surgical. Last but not least, I just want to say that I feel very privileged to be part of a women's health.
I don't know. And you can remove her from
Like,
the conference.
come over,
You can
okay.
take her out.
Yeah, can you just
Wow.
block her from the,
Yeah, you can go into her, whoever she is, Dan, and just push
Okay.
mute.
I
Yeah, you
cannot
can just
find
push
out.
mute.
Do you know who she is?
Yes.
Elena Genbug.
Подожди.
All right. I'm done. I promise. That's it. I just want to say that I feel super, super privileged to be part of the space and to lead OCON, being a real leader in women's health therapeutics. I feel that we need to donate back to the community. We adopted a college that allows women to escape the prostitution cycle. So the college gives them education and we give them jobs. We donate twice a year so they can buy clothes to go and get into job interviews. It's great because we're mostly women and they feel safe to come work here and we can give them a good reference. I myself mentor women or entrepreneurs that wish to enter the space. You don't see a lot of gray hair, but I tell you, I've been through a lot, even though I'm only 20. And so from what I know, if I can help anybody succeed, success in women's health is everyone's success, because we bring forward important innovation and medications. And of course, it also helps all of us grow together. So thank you everyone for your time. I am done.
Karen, thank you so much for the presentation and muddling through with some of the distractions. I appreciate that. I know that's not easy. And thank you, Elena, for muting your microphone now. Few questions, Karen, and I will also invite anybody in the audience, please, if you look at the bottom of the screen under chat, feel free to put any questions into the chat here. I'll be sure to either call you out, you can individually have a discussion, or I can read off any of the questions that you want to submit through the chat. Karen, you have quite a number of technologies in development off of your core platform with the wire and ball. Tell us a little bit about the commercial plans for it, the earliest introductions of the technology.
So we actually started with a smaller product. We tested it out. It was very soft and very small, and we ended up going with a slightly bigger. So we started with a mini product and ended with a midi product. So this was kind of a research and development in the works. We currently sell through distributors all across Europe, Israel, South Africa. We signed really exciting deals in Brazil and Russia, soon in China. And so we're kind of growing slowly. Regulation is killing us. There's been a huge shift in Europe from MDD to MDR. FDA is not making anyone's life easy. These are very expensive studies. Like I said, these are expensive hobbies. And so I don't think that our company is necessarily the right commercial organization to bring products to market. I think there are bigger, better players that know how to do that. And we saw some of the ones that go shopping that definitely know how to do that and have more resources than a smaller company. So I'd like to see OCON really focus on bringing this pipeline to life to get as many APIs on this little ball and allow someone else to take it to commercialize. But in the meantime, we are selling, we have a few $1 million of income, so it's not bad.
So is your strategy more so for continued R&D and clinical work and then either license out or distribute or have a full exit within the midterm?
Correct. I think that towards 2023, 2024, when we have these assets already in the FDA, and other assets really making their plow into the clinic, I think this would be a good opportunity either to do this through maybe an IPO or through a direct M&A. Sure.
Super. Last question. I saw that you had raised some capital, not in the last quarter, but fairly recently. Tell us about the journey in raising capital, A, in women's health, and B, more pertinent to OCON. And that you're looking at markets that are going to compete with behemoths in some of these IUDs, but you have a novel technology that hasn't been addressed with intrauterine drug delivery. How's the market responded from an investor standpoint?
So OCON had a specific challenge because we did a full restart about 2 years ago when I stepped in as CEO. Restarts aren't easy. They aren't easy on the management, on the board, on the investors. They aren't easy. The story that you tell, well, why did you have to do a restart? And so that was one of the challenges that we had in raising money. The other challenge, of course, is the space. It wasn't as active as it is today 2 years ago. I know that Dr. Auerbach, for example, on our board, he was one of the only ones that did a really big acquisition, 1.1 billion for the Paragard. And so there wasn't a lot of work or exits or acquisitions going on. It was really hard to substantiate this space as an attractive space. So that was another challenge. And of course, you know, you speak to mainly VCs that are headed by men. And while we have great VCs that are headed by men in OCON, it's still very challenging to have them understand 1 in 4 women abnormal uterine bleeding, 7 in 10 women, you know, suffer from a fibroid. 1 out of 10 women suffers from endometriosis. For them, they don't even, you know, fathom what that means, and they think it's somewhat of a niche because it's only women. And I get asked, so can you put this ball in any other cavities in the body? And I said, why would you need to? Did you see my pipeline? I have so much to do here anyway. So yeah, those are some of the challenges, but I got to say that it's been, you know, a fun ride. I think we're just about to go next year for our one and last big round, 20 to 25 million, to get these assets through FDA. And then I think we'll be home free, hopefully. But these are expensive hobbies, I tell you.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing the experience and educating our audience on your technology and what you're trying to accomplish, and appreciate all your efforts in women's health. We'll be back with Karen as we all come together as a group at the end of the 3 presentations. So now let's transition over to Debbie Garner, CEO of Femselect. Debbie and I have had the good pleasure to know each other for a number of years, and I'm quite interested to see the latest status of Femselect. Debbie?
Thank you, Dave. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here, and always a pleasure to sit on a panel with Karen too, because we know each other and work in Modi'in together. So thank you for introducing Modi'in. Let me share my screen and get the slides running. It's also a pleasure to be, I should say, back with the NEIBC. I did a summer internship when it was called the New England Israel Chamber of Commerce, I think it was called, probably, I don't want to date myself, but maybe even 30 years ago. And I grew up in the Boston area. So it's really especially interesting for me to be with this group tonight. So thank you. So I am here to talk with you about another women's health condition, in addition to all of the conditions that Karen just shared, another one that affects women and isn't discussed as much as it should be. And that's what Femselect is bringing to light, is the introduction to a minimally invasive treatment for pelvic organ prolapse. And many of you may not even know what that is. So that will be part of what I share this evening. And thank you, Sherry Palm, for joining. I didn't even know Sherry was going to be on. Sherry is the fearless leader of the patient advocacy group for pelvic organ prolapse. And I've worked with Sherry for a number of years, and it's really nice to see you supporting us. Thank you, Sherry.
Loving what you're doing.
Yeah, yes, we are soulmates in that. So our mission is to make a lasting impact on women's health. And in addition to pelvic organ prolapse, there are other pelvic conditions that we would like to treat as we go forward in the future, and really improving outcomes for women. That's really what we're all about. A very similar theme to Karen's. I'll take you a little bit through the company, where we're at, what we're about, and it's pretty exciting. I've been with the company for 6 years now. My background is in healthcare commercialization, both on the pharma side and the device side, a little bit in reimbursement as well, which has come in very handy in this role. So this is where we're at today. We are treating a very low unmet need. You know, we treat half of the population, which is female, and probably half of women at some point in their lifetime will experience a condition of the pelvic floor. So it is extremely common and just underdiagnosed. Many women are not even aware exactly of the condition that they may have, and simply undertreated. I'll talk a little bit about that as we go forward. we are introducing our treatment called N-Place, the first minimally invasive solution. There are a lot of other more invasive treatments, but nothing that's minimally invasive, which obviously has advantages for both women and for physicians. And we believe is clearly a good option to add to the mix. We are a commercial stage company, and that's pretty exciting for us to say, because we launched just around the beginning of COVID-19, which had its challenges with what's considered to be an elective procedure. But we are here and strong and have launched across the United States, and I'll speak to that as well. We have a very experienced team, probably over 100 years of expertise in the medical device field amongst at least the senior management. We've got a great clinical group that's been engaged over the past couple of years. And so, we're really excited to be able to bring this to you tonight. So let me talk briefly about pelvic organ prolapse. It is literally just the sagging of the pelvic floor, usually as a primary, I guess you could say, risk factor would be vaginal birth. During vaginal birth, the muscles get stretched more than 200%, and anyone who's given birth would know that. There are other risk factors such as age or menopause, but it's literally just the sagging or the dropping of those organs. And what can happen for women is they will have perhaps urinary incontinence or fecal incontinence or a bulge feeling in the pelvic area, may not even be aware of what the condition is. And some of those symptoms could be a result of a variety of different conditions. So it's really about helping them figure out what it is that they're suffering from and how they can be helped. Today, what you see is that most women, almost half who have the diagnosis of pelvic organ prolapse, really sit on the sidelines. We call them watchful waiting. They either don't like the options that exist, or they've been told, perhaps that's not so bad, come back when it's a little bit, more developed. Because the other option is perhaps Kegel exercises, which can't quite treat it, but could maybe postpone further development. Or perhaps a pessary. A pessary is basically a piece of plastic that gets inserted to hold the organs up. That comes with its own baggage, needing to be cleaned every 3 months, can cause some smell, can cause some irritation, potentially bleeding. And so most women just sit on the sidelines, and those who do opt for surgery are limited and actually face quite a long, both surgery and recovery. The surgeries themselves could be several hours, 3-4 hours, whether it's hysterectomy or a laparoscopic procedure, which sounds minimally invasive, but it actually is a 3 or 4 hour procedure. And so they tend to be very, very intense for the woman and for her recovery, which could be 6 to 12 weeks. Women, as you know, are living longer, want to have more active lives, active sex lives, and don't necessarily want to be put out for 6 to 12 weeks. And so this is where we see N-Place kind of coming in to the middle of the market. If you look at the highly invasive on the one hand and the non-invasive on the other, there really is no minimally invasive option in the middle. And that's where we see the opportunity for N-Place and its introduction into the market. So I'll speak just briefly about the technology. It's really very simple, and it was really the introduction between our medical director, a urogynecologist, and a very experienced medical device engineer who was presented with a clinical problem when treating pelvic organ prolapse. Typically, they are done vaginally, and there is a dissection, really just cutting of the vaginal wall. And that is what creates a long procedure and a long recovery, a lot of bleeding and a lot of repair time needed. And the engineer basically just said, well, why are you dissecting? Why aren't you going directly into the ligament? And that is what our device, as you can see on the right side of the screen, is designed to do. It's designed to basically take a procedure that's very well known to clinicians and give them a device that enables them to do it in a minimally invasive fashion. It means instead of 60 to 90 minutes, the procedure is on the 20-25 minute range. Instead of 6 to 12 weeks of a recovery, you're talking a couple of days. Actually, really 3/4 of the women in our studies have gone home with no pain medication whatsoever. I had a physician the other day just tell me that a patient came back and said, "Doctor, my uterus is not hanging out anymore, but you didn't do anything. I didn't feel anything. I didn't bleed. I'm back to myself." So she really thought nothing had happened. So it really shows what we can do for women with this device. Just the essence of time, I'm going to keep going kind of quickly, skip a slide or two. We have recently signed a very exciting strategic partnership with a group called Lena Medical. Lena Medical is a Danish company, and they have their own minimally invasive gynecology products. You can see here, there's 2 products on the screen. One is for in-office hysteroscopy, the other is to be used in hysterectomies, and they will now be taking Nplace and introducing it to their customer base, as well as expanding to further urogynecology, which is where Nplace is primarily used. So as of July, they have now approximately 50 reps in the field that are introducing Nplace across the United States, and it's really quite an exciting time to take a device that was developed, very small startup in Israel with under $9 million invested in the company to date, and to get to having an FDA cleared product in the hands of 50 sales reps is really a very exciting opportunity. So that's where we're at. We will also be engaging with women beginning in early 2022 to help them understand what our solution is about and who they could go to if they were interested. It's a little bit of a chicken and egg in medical device. You can't really go to consumers until you've trained the physicians and they know about it, but that is our plan to get to that. We did recruit 20% of our clinical study patients through social media, so we know that this can work in this category. And we are raising a small round now that we have our partner on board in the US. We're raising a smaller round, about a $5 million round, and that is where we look to go and hope to get to an exit in the next couple of years. As Karen already mentioned, some of the large deals have been going on in women's health, and so that's the trajectory for us. I think that's it, Dave. So I don't know if you have any questions or.
Sure. Thank you very much, Debbie. Nice, succinct presentation. One of the questions that came from Benny Zivi, who I appreciate always his insights, and I was thinking along the same lines to share with everyone. Back when I was at Hologic, we were looking at getting into the mesh market. And that was right when they were starting to have hearings down in Washington, D.C. And we all know the trials and tribulations that happen with that. Tell us about the challenges that you've run into with that and how you've overcome those issues.
Yeah, excellent question. And I can't say we've necessarily overcome them all. For those, some who are aware, maybe others aren't, transvaginal mesh was the most commonly used treatment of pelvic organ prolapse until 2019, when the FDA removed transvaginal mesh from the marketplace. So it's been a little bit of a challenge because there is a little bit of, you could say, cloud hanging over the category. Some investors are nervous, they just don't want to go there because there have been a history of lawsuits. On the other hand, it's an opportunity because there has been no new innovation. I'll say it again, no new innovation introduced since 2019. Physicians have gone either to native tissue repair, which is basically just putting a suture to hold up the pelvic floor, or gone to a sacrocolpopexy, which is a 4-hour robotic procedure, very costly for hospitals. A physician can maybe do 2 or 3 in a day. Even a physician told me today she could do 6 Nplace in her ASC, while at the same time it takes her to do 3 in the hospital. So it's an opportunity for us. We have no mesh in the device, and so that is a tremendous opportunity, but certainly a challenge to be in a marketplace that was battled with lawsuits, and certainly some of the strategics have shifted away. There are some who have really kind of walked away from their women's health business completely. And then there are others who know that, there will be women with prolapse and we have to find solutions for them. And I think that's why we're sticking it out.
Oh, that's an excellent point. There's such a high incidence and very little to offer for this this condition that is just life altering. That's really great to see you continuing along those lines.
Yes.
On your
Right after you.
commercialization, we were talking with Karen about commercialization. You've partnered now with Lena. Is that a global arrangement, or are you looking at select markets to introduce first and then expand later?
Excellent question also. It is exclusive for the US at the moment. I mean, the US market is vast and large, and pricing is a little bit higher than it will be in, let's say, some of the European countries. We do have CE mark as well, and we are exactly at this moment trying to figure out where we'll go in Europe, which countries have the most, I guess, accommodating reimbursement for our product. And we're also evaluating working with Lena potentially in the European market. They distribute in Europe under a different name called Kibomed, but they do have vast distribution in Europe. And sort of debating as a startup, do we put all our eggs in one basket, or do we try, other opportunities? So we are certainly just right now evaluating that.
You showed in a previous slide, you're going to look to place a little bit more capital, not a very large round, the use of proceeds that you're going to be seeking capital for.
Yeah, so, the raise of Lena was almost the equivalent of about a $10 million raise, if you consider, basically all comp related expenses, all travel, for the entire US market. So it was a significant value, to the Lena operation. Because of that, we're looking to raise just for our own needs and where we are still responsible. So Femselect is still responsible for the consumer activation, as I mentioned, and so proceeds will go towards that. It will go towards manufacturing and building of inventory. I think everyone knows that because of the COVID-19, just the supply chain is taking that much longer, and it's costing more money for us to build devices in advance. There's 4 or 5 month lead time on some of our raw materials. So that takes up a significant chunk of capital. And that, as well as expanding both investigator initiated work, registries in the space, and any clinical work that we do, as well as OUS, outside of the US. So expanding in Europe, potentially Australia and the UK, where mesh was taken off the market as well.
Excellent. Well, thanks again for sharing, Debbie. We'll again come back in just a little bit after Inbal has the opportunity to present GenoLife. Inbal, you're up next.
Thank you very much. Sharing the screen. Okay. So first of all, it's an honor being here, and thank you for inviting me. So a little bit of background about myself. My name is Inbal, CEO of GenoLife, PhD in immunology, and very excited to be here. So GenoLife is developing an AI-empowered platform to enable early detection of women's health diseases. And the first indication that we're approaching is ovarian cancer. So most of this presentation is about ovarian cancer, but we do have additional indications in our pipeline, for example, endometriosis and additional. So let's take a look. In the US, there are 62 million women with increased risk for ovarian cancer. And we divide these roughly into 2 groups. The first is 2 million women who have genetic predisposition, for example, BRCA mutations carrier. The other group is 60 million women above the age of 55 that are with increased risk for ovarian cancer. So similar numbers in Europe, and although millions of women around the world are at increased risk for ovarian cancer, there is no early detection for this cancer. So no early detection means that the majority of women, 75% of women, are diagnosed at late stages. These are stage 3 and 4, where the cancer has metastasized, spread throughout the body. Therefore, drugs barely work, and survival rates are extremely poor, between 5 and 20%. Cost of care is high. The minority of patients, which are diagnosed by mistake, by the way, in stage 1 and 2, will probably survive this disease. So the huge, obvious, unmet need for ovarian cancer is early detection. And I have to say on a side note that this is opposed, for example, for breast cancer, in which we have methods to detect it early, for example, mammogram or MRI. So we have this huge issue with ovarian cancer. We can't see this tumor early. How are women monitored today? So physicians use ultrasound, which unfortunately misses stage 1 and 2 ovarian cancer, and also has high false positive rates. In addition, for young women, mainly the BRCA carrier, a blood test for a protein named C125 is used. These two methods are not good enough, and C125 has low specificity and low sensitivity for ovarian cancer. So these two methods are not approved by FDA. Therefore, these 2 million women who are BRCA carriers and additional high-risk women are advised to remove the ovaries. And this is a life-saving surgery, but at the age of 35 to 45, when a woman removes her ovaries, she hits menopause and loses fertility. The minority of women who refuse to remove their ovaries know that they have high chances of being diagnosed with a late-stage lethal cancer. So ovary removal surgery saves lives only for women who have genetic background, and not all of them undergo this surgery. But what about the 60 million women in the US who are above the age of 55? 1 in 78 will be diagnosed with ovarian cancer. What is the solution for them? Well, in the meantime, there is no solution, and this is why we're here. So when we took a look on where have efforts been made in order to enable early detection of ovarian cancer, we noticed that most of the efforts are focused in the blood. And while this makes sense for other tumors, for ovarian cancer, it did not prove efficient. And we believe that the first step towards solution is looking somewhere else. And we're looking at vaginal secretions, very easy to collect, similar to COVID tests today. And as I'll show in a minute, there's a lot of data in it that if we know how to extract it, it can be life-saving. So at first, we performed proof of concept in which, so this was 3 years ago, we collected 2 healthy women, 4 ovarian cancer patients, and we measured these CA125 that everyone's using. So we collected blood, and if we take a look at the blood in women 1 to 6, and we ask who are the healthy ones, because we did not know who are the 2 healthy ones, we thought, okay, a healthy woman will have low CA125 levels. Therefore, probably woman number 6 is healthy, and maybe number 1, but it's not that clear. Now, taking a look at the same biomarkers, same CA125, same 6 women, but in secretions, the picture is different. First of all, we see that there is more in secretions compared to the blood. And second, it seems that 5 and 6 are the healthy ones. So we went back to the physician that we work with at Rambam. We told him, okay, we think that 6 is of course healthy, but also 5. And 5 looks really not healthy in the blood. And he said, of course, 5 is healthy and also 6. And this emphasizes a challenge of C125 in the blood, and this is why it's not approved. Woman number 5 is a false positive and may have had additional cancer-irrelevant pathologies, for example, allergy or viral infection. We now know that COVID also elevates C125 in the blood. So we know that biomarkers in secretions may be better indicators for ovarian cancer compared to the blood. Now, C125 is only the tip of the iceberg, and we wanted to understand which additional biomarkers are in there that can really save lives. So we're performing this big clinical trial that it's ongoing for the past 2 years, and we're collecting secretions from women. In fact, we generated the first biobank in the world for secretions, and we're analyzing multiple proteins in it. We're collaborating with Rambam, with Sheba, with Ichilov and Clalit. We were also accepted to the Mayo Clinical Accelerator, and we're starting collaboration with Mayo as well. And the objective of this clinical trial is to narrow down the amount of biomarker that we're measuring and to prove that we are much better than what's out there today. So we're using AI in collaboration with data science groups sitting in Tel Aviv. And what I'm demonstrating here is that we see a signal in early stage patients. This is groundbreaking because currently no one can see an early stage patient. And the fact that we can see it and now we're getting more and more accurate with the use of AI, This means that we can see these early stage patients early and in a state that they can be cured. So we're working with data science, or we're working with Mayo, and we also have collaboration with Case Western University around microbiome and making this test even more accurate. So how would this test look like? In the clinic use, a simple swab collection of secretions will be sent to a lab for analysis. This is similar to the pap smear flow, but very simple. And at the end of the day, the vision of GenoLife is to have a home use test. So secretions are so easy to collect, there's no reason to go to a clinic. So an app will guide the woman when to perform the test and also how to perform it. And there will be a diagnostic pad that then collects secretions, and then very simply, like a pregnancy test or like the COVID antigen test, we can use lateral flow method in order to quantitate proteins in secretions. We have already proven that this can be done. Analysis is, of course, a smart one, building a huge database of women and their data, clinical data, and also biomarker data, using AI to be more and more accurate as we gain more and more data. So in the ovarian cancer space, there are several players, and of course, the home use for us is critical because we aim to enable women to test themselves in their home, not just for ovarian cancer, but for multiple indications. But the most critical thing is that we have preliminary data that we can early detect ovarian cancer, which all of our, we call them colleagues, cannot. So this is the critical thing. And we believe that looking at secretions and looking at specific proteins, which no one else is looking at, is the right thing to do, and we're proving it by our clinical trials. So we're approaching rapidly to a US clinical trial. We're finishing our activity in the MindUp incubator, and I see some of my colleagues here as well. We recently won the first place cash prize in the Mass Challenge Accelerator. We were accepted to the Mayo Accelerator, and we generated a huge biobank, which is an asset by itself. So in terms of timelines, we have raised pre-seed and recently seed. We're approaching round A to be closed in a year from now, which will enable the US clinical trial of 5,000 women. And we expect to be ready for the market by the end of 2023 with the ovarian cancer test. We're also developing in parallel the endometriosis test as well. So I'm the CEO, and I told you about myself. My co-founder is Shlomit Uday-Reshev. She's a PhD in immunology, did her postdoc at Cornell, and she's now the head of Clinical Research Institute at Rambam. So we have a lot of good interaction with Rambam and other clinical centers in Israel, and now establishing also in the US. And I think a year ago, Orna Berry joined us. She was the first woman chief scientist in Israel, and she's an industry expert. Really, there's nothing I can say that can describe her well. She's an inspiring woman, and I think that the most important about this team is two things. First of all, we all think innovatively. We think different, but at the end of the day, Orna joined us, and Orna is a computer scientist. She joined us because she has a mission, which is similar to my mission. And Orna's mission is to beat ovarian cancer. She's doing it with her own physicians because she's an ovarian cancer patient. And she's doing it with us in order to enable women to test themselves and avoid this cancer as well. And my mission is similar to Orna's because when I go to my sister, and unfortunately I go to visit her every several months, I tell her that what I promised her that although she died from cancer, I promised her that I'll do anything I can that no woman will die that young from cancer. She died at the age of 38. So we're here because we have a mission and we're not getting no for an answer. And this is GenoLife. Very excited being here and happy to take questions.
Thank you, Inbal, for sharing and for your passion. Very important diagnostic as we look at diagnostics, trying to get more upstream or earlier in the detection. There's no question that earlier detection translates into better outcomes and survival for these patients. It almost looked like a playbook out of Cologuard that is taking stool samples and sending them to a lab for detection and earlier screening for colorectal cancer. You mentioned lateral flow. Lateral flow is ubiquitous and it's very well set up for performing self-testing. Is that your second stage after you take the samples and run them at a lab? Is that kind of a sequence that you're running to then provide for a home testing?
Yes, so we're releasing, and let's say MVP, so a simple collection to be analyzed in the lab because the regulatory path for this is much easier and we would like to gain market share, we would like to get traction, we would like physicians to collaborate with us and women to get to know this platform. But at the end of the day, our vision is that a woman can order her specific six-pack from Amazon and have 6 measurements throughout the year, which will not be very expensive because lateral flow is not expensive, as you all see with the COVID test. And the idea is that every woman can choose her own indications that she wants to screen herself. For example, let's say that God forbid she's suffering from infertility, then she can test herself for endometriosis. And if she has some kind of cancer in her family cases, cancer cases in the family, she can screen herself for ovarian, for endometrial, etc. So every woman can choose her own panel to screen and can do it at her home. But yes, we will start at the lab because it's an easier way to get into the market and generate revenue relatively early.
Excellent. A little bit about the biomarker. Are these novel biomarkers, or is it more the algorithm that you've run to look at a couple of different biomarkers in concert with each other?
Right, so it's both. In terms of novel biomarkers, we're not discovering new proteins. We're using known proteins. We're measuring known proteins. Our secret sauce is 2 things. First of all, using AI in order to understand what's the combination, which combinations are better than others. So several biomarkers, this is not a ballgame of one biomarker. So several biomarkers in which we're getting from AI, but I think the second, which is not less important, is that we're using non-trivial biomarkers because when people are looking for cancer, they're looking for cancer biomarkers. Now it makes sense. However, when the cancer is small and is undetectable, also the amount of biomarker is small. So it doesn't really make sense to look for cancer biomarkers when looking for early stage cancers. And this is why we're looking for the host response biomarkers. What does this mean? We're looking for the body's reaction to the cancer. And we know how to do it, and we're getting great results.
With any type of screening, you always look at the patient and the clinical pathway. So if a patient were to take their secretions and test positive, what are the next steps that the clinician would take? And I guess the setup is, what happens with false positives? You know, when we look at breast screening, for instance, very, very accurate to a degree. And when patients are sent to MRI, there's quite a lot of noise in the MRIs for breast. So you have to be extremely selective without getting a host of false positives and then have to go to biopsy and so forth. Tell us a little bit about the patient pathway and your positive predictive value target.
Right. So breast cancer is simpler in that way because let's say we have a positive answer by MRI, you can do fine needle aspiration, which is relatively, it's not non-invasive, but it's not that of an issue. For the ovaries, it's a challenge. We cannot biopsy a suspicious cyst in the ovaries because if we do and we punch it and this is a cancer, then these cells spread through the abdomen and time to metastasis shortens and the woman will die. So the only thing that we can do And what is being done now, if a woman arrives with a suspicious cysts and we measure her CA-125 and let's say it's high, by the way, even if it's low, they do the same. They perform surgery to remove the ovaries, and only with pathology, they can really see what's happening there. We would like to give the physician another tool to decide who really needs to go to a surgery and who doesn't. There are many women who have cysts and the physicians advise not to go for surgery, and these women die from ovarian cancer. And on the opposite side, there are women with suspicious cysts that go for a surgery and it's nothing. So the decision-making here is critical, and we would like to give a tool. So the downstream, the patient's journey, if the test is positive and the ultrasound doesn't look that good, and C125, if it's high, if it's low, it has 60% accuracy, she will go for a surgery. And regarding false positive, this is something that we're all dealing with. But at the end of the day, I speak with physicians, and I have one expert from Oxford University spoke with me, and he told me that for every 10 women that he sends for surgery to remove the ovaries, only one is an ovarian cancer patient. And he tells me, I send all these 10 women because I know that I'm saving her life, and I don't know who it will be. He told me, if you can have me out of 10 women succeeding in 3 or 5, then this is a huge success on my side. So the physicians are craving, looking for new methods, and we will be the ones who will give them.
Thank you. I will address one question that specifically came to you from the audience, stating that ovarian cancer begins in the fallopian tubes, and you can use scopes and actually aspirate from the fallopian tubes for detection, or use laser and treatment. That might be able to treat at the fallopian tube level, but getting into the actual target might be a different challenge. How does the incidence of being able to detect in the fallopian tube level, such as an Envision, impact Genolife?
Right, so Envision, we know them well, acquired by Boston Scientific. At the end of the day, it's invasive, and we're looking for specific for ovarian cancer for a non-invasive, very simple tool. And by the way, a downstream test can be the Envision test. So let's say a woman is positive, instead of removing her ovaries, we can use the Envision test and then decide. So we would like to be a tool in the tool set of the physician in order to enable early detection. And in addition, it's not only about ovarian cancer. It's about many women's related diseases that can be seen by secretions or secretions analysis, and is currently not being used. So there are competitions. We think that we can be upstream or downstream to several of them. But at the end of the day, we would like to be a simple, not very expensive, and a lot of information getting out of this platform for the physician to use, and downstream also for the woman to use.
Thank you, Mbal. I'd like to at this time invite Karen and Debbie back into the discussion. Again, audience, please, if you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand through the app or submit a question on the chat box below. I postulate to the group, I was reading through a report by Femtech Analytics, just an incredible report where they count over 1,500 companies in women's health and development, all kinds of data on how they segment it and the investments. I think we've seen an uptick of about 70% invested into women's health in the past 3 years. Pre-19, it was very low, and we've seen an uptick. They project 15% CAGR in women's health. Exciting, but still we remain at less than 1.5% of dollars in healthcare going into women's health. Your viewpoint of that, do you see this changing? You've been in this market for quite a number of years, all three of you. Your viewpoint on the investment in women's health?
Do you want me to go first, Debbie?
Go right ahead.
Is that okay? So As I mentioned, I do a lot of mentoring. I sit on advisory boards of Femtech Lab in the UK. And what I tend to see is that a lot of, companies in the space either have one product, one service, one app, makes it super difficult for investing because it may cater to a certain indication or a device that caters to a certain disease area. But you see a lot of little companies. And I think that if there was a way to put together some of these awesome ideas and create something a little bit bigger, to create platforms and to create something that may be more investable for investors, I think that would be a lot smarter. I can tell you that one of my dreams is to get enough money into OCON to really, acquire some or help some of these companies to come in, because we have labs and we have people here that know how to get products through the development chain. There's so much here that can be used to help smaller companies that I think it's a waste if we don't try to bring those together. And I think it's a little hard because investors, when they look at markets and they do all their due diligence to do it on a one-off small little service or app or device, makes it extremely difficult to invest in this space. That's just my 2 cents from what I see.
Debbie, I know you were fundraising for some time. Your perspective on the investment community?
Yeah, I will add and maybe even echo what Karen was saying. I think it is a theme in women's health, and maybe in other areas too, but it is something that we've talked about internally and with our board about perhaps a pelvic floor roll-up of some type of multiple solutions, partially from an investor perspective, partially from an efficiency perspective, as Karen mentioned, but then also for the woman herself who doesn't always know what she's facing, and many solutions across a spectrum could appeal to the same consumer. Really, it's it's the same woman. So that is something that we are working on and thinking about internally how to make it happen. Difficult because, as you said, so many of them are in the startup phase, and there aren't many that have significant revenues at the moment. That makes it harder to do a roll-up with no revenue base. There's plenty more roll-ups to be had in a lot of other industries with existing companies. So that's definitely something that we see. And it is interesting, though, that, with women making 80% of healthcare decisions, I'm sure you've heard that statistic many, many times. And yet there's been a lag in innovations for women's health, because women are making the healthcare decisions, but they're making them for their spouses or their children or their parents, but they're not necessarily dedicating them, that time to themselves. So we hope this is the beginning of some kind of revolution of women taking care of themselves too. And being part of the decision making. And I think that will drive investment dollars. And then, of course, as there's daily probably updates on women in venture and women in private equity and women sitting on boards, as that trend continues, there will be more investments in women's health, because you do see that as women get onto these boards and they understand more, then they want to invest too.
OBGYN is a massive field. Even the report I was referring to had about 15 different segments. There's a lot to attend to and many different solutions or options for treating a condition. Are some of these new technologies, is the issue patient or clinician awareness? And what do you look to drive on both ends of that? Obviously, the DTC is very expensive. And at the end of the day, the clinician should be directing patient care. But the education of the patient could be paramount to helping to drive more awareness even amongst the clinician community. Tell me a little bit about your viewpoints on that, Imbal, because you have very strong elements of DTC and promotion.
Right.
Debbie,
So
oh, sorry, no, go ahead.
So thank you, Karen. So we believe that educating the women is not less important than educating clinicians in our capabilities. And this is a critical issue. In women's health in general, we see these trends of women being aware to what may be wrong with them, with their bodies, why they're feeling pain. For example, for endometriosis, it's clear these women are being dismissed home, take a paracetamol and go home, everything is okay with you. And then they look by themselves and they try to find an answer. We would like these women to be well educated about the things that we can bring to them and the solutions that we can bring to them. So I think it's, first of all, critical that the population will be educated and will have the methods or the means to be educated. And second, to relate to what to your previous question, we do see women in more significant positions, which also enables awareness and brings more funds. And when I say in positions, I mean on boards, on women who are scientists, leading scientists, and all these advancements in women's positions in different fields enables this woman health space to grow and to be what it should have been probably 50 years ago.
Dave,
Good point.
if you don't mind, I'd like to also add, when you look
Please.
at direct to consumer, we are talking about the US right now, and direct to consumer is very popular. In Europe, you cannot go direct to consumer at all. You can't talk about your product. You can't say the name of your product. It's regulatory unacceptable. Israel and the US are very similar in that sense, where you can, promote on TV, on Facebook, but in other parts of the world, that's not necessary. So that's just one point to consider. And also, I totally agree with what Inbal is saying, but I also want to stress the fact that, us women, we don't know the options available for us. Doctors don't have time to explain. When women go, even for prolapse or even for contraception, doctors don't have the time to sit for 40 minutes or 45 minutes and to really explain all of the options, and also to be able to interview the woman, what her needs are, what her family status is, what her desires are, what her lifestyle is, and what option would be best for such woman if she's looking at different disease areas. Many women are dismissed and just doctors don't have time. It's such a difficult place to be. I really believe that most of us women health companies will have to educate women, doctors, whoever we can.
Yeah, I took a survey of some of the OBGYNs that I collaborate with, and I took their patient intake survey, just collecting the data and information, and I couldn't even find 10% of the OBGYNs that were asking about how's their incontinence, which is one of the highest incidence issues. So we need to keep promoting the awareness of solutions and educate people about their conditions, that these are abnormal for normal health, but they're not entirely abnormal for incidents within pelvic health and other conditions. So I applaud you for all the efforts that you make there. I think that's about the end of our time. If you have any other comments, I invite you to bring up other points, including more efforts around awareness. We started at Alera Health a patient engagement module in practice that is not only patient engagement for promoting technologies, but it's rarely getting the patient aligned with the companies at the development stage and developing these technologies that are suitable with patient inputs. Have you looked at some of the patient inputs as well as designing your technologies?
Yeah, I can answer that. In our clinical study, we actually used 2 patient-related quality of life measures that are, very standardized in the urogynecology field. In fact, one of them is related specifically to pelvic health and how they're feeling, and one is more around sexual activity. And we couldn't even get enough of the women to respond to that survey, and it was in the privacy of a clinical study and in the structure of a clinical study. So it's really hard to get really good data. Could be, we even used one that filtered out those who chose to say they were not sexually active. So we're talking about women who were self-selecting as sexually active and still wouldn't respond to the survey. So it's tough. But I would also say in our primary endpoint, for those of you who are clinically minded, a primary endpoint is, how you determine if your study is successful or not. We included not only an anatomical endpoint, but we included a very simple question. how is your bulge, your pelvic floor bulge compared to prior to surgery? A very simple question, yes or no. And that was a third of the endpoint, the other piece being whether they had subsequent surgery or not. So it has to be included, because you might fix someone's anatomy, at least in our business, but you haven't solved her problem. If you haven't solved her problem, then you got to go back to square one. So we had real high bar on that item.
Karen, I would expect a lot of the same issues that you're going to face when you look at nulliparous women that have IUDs inserted. The pain is sometimes a deterrent, is just for the insertion crossing the cervix. And then there are different configurations. I think that's likely why you have many different technologies, where some women are opposed to having hormonal therapy, even if it's regional and delivered intrauterine. A little bit about the patient feedback that you've been able to capture.
Well, we're in a different position because we have the thinnest insertion tube in the world. It's even thinner than the cervix itself, so there's no need to dilate. So it's a lot less invasive in terms of an insertion. We haven't done a lot in the sense of our first product, which is the contraception, but I can definitely tell you on our second product, which treats abnormal uterine bleeding, where women have the choice of a hormonal therapy or going to the hospital and getting, physically removal of the lining of the uterus, of the endometrium. We checked for pain scores, and the only pain score that was recorded was in the insertion that was transient and kind of went away. But women really reported that there was no pain associated. They couldn't feel anything. They left the doctor's office after 30 minutes and they went home and they literally stopped bleeding. So this is, super exciting. We do collect quality of life as part of the clinical studies, super important. But when a woman bleeds, half a liter of blood a month versus hardly anything, a day or two of bleeding, you can imagine her quality of life. There's no anemia. She doesn't have to stay home for a few days. She doesn't have to take 2 sets of clothes with her when she leaves the house. So it's a huge difference in quality of life. So we collect that as well. I know Debbie does too, but it's something that's super, super crucial. We're going to do our FDA studies, and I'm still considering if we should have women do a journal or not. Sometimes it's a deterrence. So women don't want to enter a study because they have to work hard on it. So I'm still considering it, but these, elements are super important. Quality of life is super important.
Right. Well, let's wrap up with a two-pronged question for Inbal then. The same issue, have you designed the home test with a lot of user feedback? Because you can have a very accurate test if it's not performed by a non-clinician or a laboratorian, then that could be an issue. So tell us about the design of that with user inputs. And then Benny also asks another question about getting to statistical significance. How long would your trial likely be for that in patients, and the dollars required to execute that trial?
All right, thank you. So regarding the design of the collection apparatus for secretions, this is currently not being developed in Genolife. So we're only using a swab. And I have to say that for ovarian cancer, women are calling us and they would fill these questionnaires, and we're asking them many questions which are private, and they answer it because at the end of the day, they know that we're here to help them. So we're currently collecting using a swab. It's a very simple procedure done by the physician, can be done by a nurse, and can be done by the woman itself. When we will approach the design of the diagnostic pad, of course, we will have feedback from users. We would like this to be a very simple to use. We're enabling women, so this should be simple to use, very trivial, and fast test. We know that to enable home use, these are the requirements, and we'll do so. But again, we need to remember that women ask to join our clinical trials because they don't want their daughters to remove the ovaries at the age of 30. So they're engaged with our mission, and for me, it's very encouraging. Regarding the clinical trial, yes, we're working very hard. We have FDA pre-submission by the end of Q1 2022, so in several months. And then we know exactly the sample size, but consulting with our experts, probably we will need 5,000 women to be examined by our platform. And we're starting to raise round A, which will be 10 million. And this will enable a big US clinical trial and approaching FDA. So we hope that 5,000 women, we believe that it will give us the statistics that we need, and we'll be ready for market by the end of 2023.
Fantastic. Well, that's a wrap to this webinar. Thank you so much to my panelists, and a major thank you to Dan for the invitation. I really enjoyed this. And thanks to the Israeli technology community. NEIBC has counted over 70 women's health companies in development just in Israel alone. So we see quite a community there in development and in technology. I appreciate that. We had only 3 to present today. We could have selected any one of the 70. These were 3 what we found the more exciting technologies. And I invite everybody to look at all of them if you have a particular interest in women's health, and hopefully we'll be able to do more of these. Dan, thank you so much.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Debbie and Inbal. And based on the interest we received, maybe next year we'll do part B and bring 3 more companies to a session. So
You don't have to wait a year.
no, I said next year, which is maybe January, February timeframe. With all that, I really appreciate you coming, and it was a fascinating session. Thank you very much.